I think so. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the March 22nd edition of Portola Valley's Architectural and Site Control Commission. I think it's the 22nd. It all runs together now.
Yeah.
But I think that's right. Anyway, Laura, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Koch,
Here.
Commissioner Chung. Muted. There we go. Okay, so he's
Okay.
indicated that he's present.
Yes.
Commissioner Sill,
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yeah.
and Chair Ross.
Here. Thank you. All right. I'm going to open the public comment portion of our meeting and invite any members of the public who are in attendance today to address us on any item that's not on our agenda, any subject that's not on our agenda. If it's an agenda related item, there will be an opportunity to speak during that item. Laura, is anybody raising their hand?
Yes, we have Betsy Morgenthaler first.
Okay, welcome, Betsy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I am here today to ask for your attention. I have a concern. It's not my concern. It's been the focus of attention throughout the larger neighborhood here. I live across the street from the Sequoias on Portola Road. Last Friday evening, out walking along the Sequoia Trail, which was newly reopened after a closure. Early on evidence of work became, as I rounded the corner, a stunning amount of clearing from above the trail right on down the canyon to the edge of their property line, exposing a vast area that used to be wooded to daylight. So aside from my own grappling with the ecological, I realize the Sequoias and the rest of us are in a fire zone. I attended the wildfire committee meeting, the ad hoc wildfire committee meeting last Thursday, and there was a broad discussion around the issues, but there were no specifics planned, no timing named. And the reason why I am bringing this to your attention, because I realize you're not trails, you're not conservation, you're the ASCC, is about a question about appropriate site review, imagining that over the years, without knowing, mind you, imagining over the years the Sequoias might have applied for a conditional use permit that would have come to you, and that there might indeed be a site review, and maybe it's time, if that is true, time to review the conditional use permit because of the profound impact that this will have, be it, it looks very short-term thinking from where I'm sitting. Let's take away the word beauty because there's been an enormous sacrifice of beauty. But taking away the issue of beauty, there are profound ecological issues that are at work here that I think will make this penny wise and pound foolish at a minimum. There's much more detail that I'm willing to provide, but probably not at this time. I invite comment because I think you might be hearing from other people at other times. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. It's the format of this unfortunately prevents us from discussing or really commenting on your comments, but I'll just note that if they weren't already, staff is now fully aware that there may be an issue here, and hopefully can look into that and perhaps even get back to you directly with.
I would so appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Laura, do we have anybody else?
Yes, Vice Chair Wilson has her hand up though. Did you want to take that before we take the next member of the public?
Oh,
Not-
sure. Jane, you're speaking as a member of the public?
Yes, I
Go
have.
ahead.
I'd also received an email regarding the Sequoia's clearance and from another concerned party. And I believe that the town are already aware because they have been emailed on this. And that basically, you know, the town does know. But I think this is the disparity that I commented on before between what the fire marshal says he wants and what the environmental issues are with clearance of properties. So I think I'm not sure whether it will be a trails thing or whether it will need to come back to us. But the Sequoias also have concerns about the planting of more oleanders and a blue fir. So we might need to look at the planting plan from the Sequoias that we looked at a couple of years ago. So that's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Jane. Other members of the public?
Yes, Laura Pogorleska. I'm sorry about that if I didn't get that right.
Porgazelska. Well, welcome,
Yeah.
Laura. You're on.
Thank you. So I'm Laura Pogorzelska, and I'm from Stonegate Road. And I would like to double check if my email was received regarding the noise. I sent it around a week ago.
Is this in regards to the Neely Winery project?
Partially, yeah.
And
It
so-
was sent 8 days ago. I think the title was Noise. Yeah, I can resend. It would be, yeah, I just want to make sure that it was received.
So through the chair,
Yes,
I
Laura.
believe that this is, if I understand correctly, it's related to the noise at the Neely Winery. I think you confirmed that it's at least partially connected to that. And so those comments would be batched with that project when that project goes forward for ASCC and Planning Commission consideration.
Very good. Thank you. Laura Russell, do we have more hands?
No, there's no other hands up.
All right. Then we'll close the public hearing and move on to our regular agenda. We have one item of new business today. It's a conceptual design review of a new residence at 627 Westridge Drive, the Murad Bedford residence. And I understand that Ms. Avila is going to make the presentation today.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief introduction to ASCC members. Suzanne Avila joined us before the pandemic to work on some special projects. She's a very experienced planner, including being the previous planning director for the town of Los Altos Hills and other nearby communities. So she has a lot of understanding of the types of issues that we're looking at. So we've been so busy trying to move things forward. She has graciously agreed to work on some additional projects for us. So in this case, Dylan worked with the applicant in the pre-application meeting phase. And then we're transitioning this project over to Suzanne so that she can take it forward from here. So as you know, for the conceptual design review, as we've been practicing it for the last couple of months and kind of seeing how that works for us, we have just the basic information for you and then really leave it to you for your discussion. But I wanted to introduce Suzanne. You will be seeing her on this project and at least one other single family home and then some other things depending on how things go and depending on her availability. So that's just the brief introduction that I wanted to give.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're ready for the presentation.
Well, I don't have a prepared presentation for you, commissioners. My understanding was in watching your previous meeting where you reviewed a couple of projects that staff wasn't really doing a presentation. It was on hand for questions, comments, that kind of thing. The one thing I did want to make you aware of is one of the discussion items in the staff report was that the existing garage carport structure that the owners intend to keep on the property with the project. Staff originally was not able to find any correct record of final inspection for that structure, but the property owner had found a record and provided that to staff today. So we do have evidence that all the inspections were done and that that structure was finalized by the town. So that's probably one item you can just take off your discussion items list.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much. And thank you for the workup of the numbers. That's very helpful. Does anybody have a question for Suzanne before we go to the applicant?
I would love to ask some questions. What is the size of the existing carport and garage that square footage wise that's proposed to remain?
I don't actually know. I'd have to look that information up for you. It's got to be in the neighborhood of 700 or 800 square feet, if not a little bit bigger, because it's got 3 bays.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, based on the numbers that you gave us, I think we can back into it, right? You gave us
I think it was something like 797.
right, it's about 700. Yeah, it's about
because I did break that out in the table as what the the house versus the accessory structure was.
Yeah.
So it should be in that first table with all the existing floor area.
Right.
And okay, so I didn't see that table. I just saw like a total of the property. Is this to remain structure considered in the square footage, the total square footage?
Yes, it is.
And have we received any more neighbor comments?
No, just the one from the neighbor that has the easement that the driveway goes through.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
I had
Jane?
I had one also related to detached garage. In the packet, it says that there's going to be 2 covered and 3 uncovered. But if you've got a detached garage with 3 bays, doesn't that make 5?
We didn't count those because the property owner indicated that they are considering in the future that they might make that a guest house or another use. So we didn't count it as required parking. But you're correct. Currently, it is parking spaces and it would be additional parking on the property.
Right. Okay. And did we know which fault line is the line that's going through the property? It says fault line, but I didn't know which one.
I don't know the name of the fault. It is just mapped in terms of showing the location and then the setbacks. So it's on the west side of the property.
Yeah.
I don't think it has a name. It's too minor to be named. We have the report. It's not a named fault.
Right.
That makes any sense.
Definitely.
Yeah,
not-
it is a fault trace versus a major fault line.
Thank you. That's all mine.
All right. Anybody else? Questions for Suzanne?
None from me.
I had a small question.
Kenny?
Regarding the impervious surface, the exceeding the maximum requirement, were the applicants trying to provide some rationale for doing so, or were they just unaware of the requirement?
I believe my best guess is, because I haven't confirmed this with the architect or the owners, but site currently has more impervious coverage than is allowed. And so they were keeping it just underneath that, using that as sort of a guide versus the maximum number, which is 12,000 some odd square feet. So I don't know whether they had any discussion with staff about it. It was just something that came up when we started looking at the numbers and looking at the details.
Okay, thank you. So we're not expecting...
That was my assumption, and maybe the owners can add some clarity to that. Now I'm guessing the designers looked at it, said, hey, there's 14,000 plus square feet here, and they're keeping the existing number, going slightly under with the new project.
That's right. That's right. And Chris, you're on mute, but I think we did that assessment, right? We're trying to mirror.
Yes, hi. I'm listed as Kelly, but I'm Chris. That's exactly right. We were coming in under, and then we were trying to figure out how to address the rest. And we actually thought that going through this process would help us get any other guidance or information on that, because the driveway is really occupying most of that, a huge portion of that square footage. So we've had a couple talks with the owners about a couple options we can do to reduce the square footage, because as far as the landscape goes, we have pretty minimal site coverage when you get off the driveway. And if you take the house and the driveway out, we have very minimal pathways and coverage outside of that. So I guess one question we had, and I think we've sort of tried to figure out the answer today, but is there any credit that comes back from the fire truck turnaround on the site coverage?
Let me just hit the pause button for a moment there, and we'll complete sort of the commissioners raising questions. Then we'll go to an applicant presentation, and we can have a question and answer discussion about all of the various items at that point. So just to put a little bit of order in how we proceed with this review, I'll just ask if there are any other questions from commissioners before we go to the applicant. Looks like none. So now we'll go ahead and ask the applicants to go through the project for us and ask questions if there are questions to be asked, and tell us what you're planning to do.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you all. I'm Kelly Bedford. It says Willrich. I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to fix it. I'm Kelly Bedford. This is Joe Murad.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
This is our landscape architect, Chris Franklin is on, and then Kevin Hardy is from Chambers and Chambers, who are the architects. So that's the team here with you today. And basically we are just presenting, this is a home we're building for our family, Joe and I'm new to the area. I moved from Marin County, and we have almost grown and out 4 children. So we're building a house that's for our next generation, for the family to gather.
If we're lucky, right?
If we're lucky.
We can talk them into it. Yeah.
We are so excited about the land and the oak trees. And as I said in my letter to all the neighbors, we really bought the lot for the trees. They're amazing. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to go visit that site, but it's spectacular. So the house was designed with that in mind. And with that in mind, there wasn't a lot of buildable space. So it's pretty straightforward where we're putting it, which is basically where the existing house was. We kept it relatively modest in size while still trying to accommodate the needs of 4 kids and 2 adults and hopefully grandchildren. So it's coming in, I think, just a little under 5,000 square feet, the house. And yes, we're keeping the existing garage. Our thought for now is it's kind of a potentially like a work shed space, gardening. We would never have 5 cars, so it's not a car situation. It was more of it's a good structure in good condition, and we could probably use it for something. But we needed to build an attached garage. And then I think one of the issues with the impervious area is there's a very large turnaround, as you all know, for fire trucks. So that was sort of an unavoidable condition of the site, the way that it lays out. And then as for the style, we wanted to keep a really simple kind of a farmhouse vernacular. It's modern in the sense that it has a modern floor plan, but it's not a modern structure. And we kind of, our intention was to have it look as though it could have been built in the early 1900s and then remodeled. So farmhouse looking windows, typical cedar shingles, the standing seam roof for part of it and comp shingle for the rest. We want to put a porch across the back that looks over at Windy Hill. We imagine just basically spending most of our lives there. And then for the landscape program, we asked for everything basically that would just sort of enhance and support the existing natural landscape. So it's also pretty simple. Our architect, Barbara, was having technical problems, so she's not on this call yet. Kevin, I don't know if she wanted you to say anything or if you have anything to add in addition to what I just said, or Joe, if you have anything.
I don't have anything to add. I did see her on here. I don't know where she went. She was here a few minutes ago.
Just for color and context, we've worked with Chambers and Chambers, previously. We built a beautiful home in Marin. As Kelly pointed out, our children are here for the most part. Most of them are out of the house, actually. 3 of them are in college. One's still at home down here in Menlo Park. And so we expect a pretty smooth and seamless experience because we've been through this before. And we're foolish enough to do it again because we actually we may be the select few that one liked our builder and liked our architect post build. So I think that's always a pretty good testament of a good working relationship. And Kelly has a long operating history in design. So it's made my life a lot easier. And we have high expectations that this is the last job that we do. And we get to hunker down because I did grow up in the area. And for all intents and purposes have never really left for all the obvious reasons. This particular parcel was one that was intriguing from inception, really, because I think Kelly will attest, she didn't really look at any of these lots through the prism of looking at the trees initially until we kind of introduced this concept. And because that's how I've always looked at it, and I get a little jaded because you can't replace a 100 or 200-year-old black oak tree, right? And this is what I think this is most spectacular. The blue oaks that are on that parcel are just unbelievable. So we're trying to preserve as much of that, obviously, as we can, with also balancing in the fact that we actually have to have some modern accommodations and ability to accommodate, I guess, our quality of life and living that we have today. So that's all I have. I don't have much more context or color than that. I'm really looking forward to being part of the community. I think that's the other thing is we want to make sure that we're engaged and involved. And I think we've historically shown that we've done that as well. So.
Great, thank you. Would the landscape architect like to add anything, or are you wrapped up?
I guess if we wanted to touch back on the impervious surface, yeah, that would be helpful.
Great.
And, I guess to understand if there are there any other coverage areas that that get some break on them, or is there a credit back for any of the driveway or the fireplace, the fire truck access, or are there any other items like that we should consider, or is it just a straight count and we need and being at about or just under what was there previously doesn't matter, and we just have to meet the lower number?
Those are all very good questions. And
do you want me to take a stab at those?
yes, please, Laura. I was just going to ask you to throw in on that.
So in the big picture, yes, you have to comply with today's code. So when you build a new house, you have to comply with all of the standards in effect today. So just being underneath the previous is not sufficient for code purposes. I can tell you, though, that the ASCC has looked very favorably upon projects that have dramatically reduced their impervious surface in the past. So it doesn't go unnoticed when you make that effort. Yes, the impervious surface requirements are strict. That is an intentional policy decision that I think has been in place for a long time. In terms of the fire truck turnaround, there is not an exemption for that. Most of the larger properties in town will have a fire truck turnaround, so that counts. But there is an exemption for extra long driveways. So I don't know how the driveway is configured in particular, but it would be worth looking up. It's code section 18.56.010. And that's the code section that takes into consideration driveways that are extra long, because we do have some of those for some of the larger properties or different configurations. So you should take a look at that. There are some minor things that can be exempted that we can Suzanne can work with you on, and we'll provide that support to her so that she knows how some of those previous interpretations have been made in the past, but those are pretty minor things. And then ASCC has given 50% credit to certain like geoblock pervious material that can be used for some things like overflow, driveways or lightly used areas. So that may be an option as well.
Okay, okay, great. So should we just follow up then with Susan and for?
Yeah, you're going to follow up with
Yes.
Suzanne after this meeting, after you hear the feedback from the ASCC on other aspects of the project and work on, revisions, then we can help you with those details.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And that's
right
a
now,
driveway because of the easement, how you get in there.
Do you guys, should I mention the thing that we talked about today as a potential solution, just so we have it out there right now?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you go down the very long driveway, currently the house, you veer off to the left to get to the existing garage. And it's all black tar, whatever. What's it called? Pavement.
Asphalt.
It's 1,825 square feet.
How much?
1,825 square feet.
That's pretty perfect. So as mentioned, we don't need a bunch of overflow parking. We were just going to leave that there because it's there. But the thought is we could just remove all that asphalt and make it natural grasses or whatever with a small pathway to access the existing garage, since it's not going to really be for cars anyway. That would solve the problem, because that's 1,800 is more than we need. Does that sound like the kind of thing you'd be looking for?
That sounds like a good solution.
Yep.
Yeah.
That, or if you do feel like you ever might need to bring, if it becomes a workshop, you need to bring some kind of equipment down there, like those geo blocks that, basically are structures of mini planters. And it sounds like those can give you a discount. And even minimizing it, how that driveway tends to come out to, let's say, a fork shape for 3 cars. At the end, you might not need that much more too.
Right, that's right. We could have a little hardscape to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's
That's an easy solve.
the solution I think that we will work towards.
If it was going to be turned into an ADU, Laura, would there be any extra square footage they could use to keep the driveway partially because of parking for the ADU, if it was to become an ADU?
Potentially, we would have to look at that closely. So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, and there are certain state requirements that are in effect that create some exemptions from the local zoning standards for certain ADUs. So that may be possible in this case, if you were thinking of making it into an ADU, but we could look at that for you and see if that would be an option.
Well, I guess the one thing I would propose is, like, we want simplicity, right? We want to remove any type of complexity, introduce new problems here of a potential ADU in the future. I just, from our perspective,
It's so far down the road, I don't even.
It's probably doesn't warrant, complicating at this stage.
I do have one question on the subject. It was this owner, we bought the house from the sole owner, and it's amazing what he left behind. Every receipt, 1953.
Wow.
Been really actually cool. Every drawing, everything.
Right.
And they had at one point planned a barn. And I just wanted to ask, does being so close to the impervious, does that mean that we are in the future, forget an ADU, that we can never build, let's say, a small barn or a little pool or a guest house or anything on the rest of the property? Is that we're maxed out? Is that how I'm understanding?
Good question. Laura, do you have some feedback on that?
The maximum is the maximum. So sometimes what people do if they have future plans is to leave a little bit of impervious surface for some future use. We do have some people that will trade it out. They'll remove it from one area and add it to another area in order to be able to use the property differently over time. So you want to think about, future uses, and then if you can, leave yourself a little bit of impervious surface to use in the future.
And I also think that this 18.5601, long driveway, this is a long driveway.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the parameters are on that document, but that's something to look at. And, just to do your best. I know you're getting rid of the shuffleboard, which is a shame, but I'm just kidding. That's really cute that it was there. But, there are some things too you can think about for decking, but I do think it's mostly the driveway.
Yeah.
So
Hard
maybe
part with the driveway is the way the contours of the land open up. We can't really pull the house closer. It's sort of it's
right. No, the building site, I think we all can agree is in the appropriate placement, especially that dynamic, gorgeous oak.
Right.
I mean, it should have its own TV show. It's so gorgeous. Don't pull closer to that.
Right.
Okay, I think we understand.
Okay, good.
Is the existing swimming pools coming out?
That's
Correct.
right.
And does that count as impervious surface, Laura? And has that removal been calculated in the net change?
I don't know,
Laura,
Suzanne, if you were
Yes.
able to tell so far in the
Yeah,
plan.
the pool and hardscape were already proposed to come out, and so that's already been taken into account.
Okay, great, thank you. All right,
Are pools considered
commissioners,
impervious?
yes, go ahead.
Sorry, pools are considered impervious.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah, they hold water.
Right. Hopefully they don't percolate.
You hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we hope.
All right.
All right, commissioners, do you have any unasked questions of the applicant?
I have a couple more.
Please, go ahead.
Have you thought about an upcycle, recycle with all the brick?
Oh, yeah.
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 We're in discussion on that with Chris.
Great.
Purely from an aesthetic standpoint, we definitely intend to kind of pile that up and use it somehow.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a demand for brick from.
I think some of it's set in mortar and some of it's not. So I think.
Right. Of course. So
Yeah.
of course, salvaging it might not be. And then there was a lighting fixture in question that we're hoping to get some more feedback on. I already mentioned that magnificent oak. So I guess the two things with brick you answered, and then that lighting fixture that was in the packet.
Yeah.
That maybe didn't meet the dark sky compliance, which is really important here, which I'm sure you understand from Marin, and the night sky is just glorious.
Completely. And to be honest, that's a miscommunication with the architect. No one's attached to that lighting at all. So that's an easy, for the next meeting or sooner, we can submit something. I think I understand it to be that no visible light bulbs, essentially. So I'm thinking of putting just a classic barn light.
Yeah.
Something very simple. Is that so that the line just shines down?
Yeah, just
Right.
down, not out, not up.
Yeah, got it.
Nothing in trees, as much as that's gorgeous for a magazine shoot.
Yeah.
We can't do it.
Yeah, the landscape art, Chris is very clear on that. And I think the submittal for the landscape lighting, there are no issues. It's just the
Correct.
decorative lights. So we'll correct that for the formal submission.
And I believe there is a list available of dark sky compliant fixtures that the town recommends or is comfortable with. So that might be a good guide to check that out.
With actual manufacturer names?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
No, it's more like the type of fixture and the lumens.
I saw the illustrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I see that.
Yeah. So we couldn't update it that often. And that would be there's so much out there, and as you are a designer, I'm sure you can source something fun too.
There's also a light, it looks like on the driveway gate, which which we try to discourage any lighting at the gateway.
Yeah.
Only so that you can see the number if you're visiting. And we try to avoid any lights on driveways because we hope that headlights will show you where you're going. And I was also wondering why the decision for not a standing seam roof over all of the property rather than having the cedar shingle on the top part.
Oh, it's a good question. Barbara, do you want to answer that? We didn't really.
Well, it was just an aesthetic decision. We have mixed materials before in the past, and we just sort of like the look of that, you know, accentuating the different forms of the buildings, like, you know, kind of a typical farmhouse, you'd get different shapes and massing volumes. So we just, you know, we like that. It was just an aesthetic choice.
All right, and the chimneys are going to be for gas fireplaces?
Yeah, for gas fireplaces, and also one is for the kitchen flue, and we typically locate 2 flues on the roof so that you don't have all those penetrations in the roof for you know, toilet vents, sink vents, kitchen vents, and so we just vent everything out and up, and it's just a much more attractive roof composition instead of seeing, you know, penetrations all over the roof.
Yeah,
good idea.
So they're a little fake, but they're real. I mean, they're real in the fact that it's not a chimney flue everywhere, but it's flues that are necessary for building code.
Yeah, and then they also exceed the maximum building
height. The chimney flues do. Is that usually those are exempt? Are they not exempt in your area?
It's fine.
I mean, the chimney flues are typically exempt from the height restrictions just because they're. I mean, maybe in your area that's not true.
They're fine. They're fine.
I thought but if the roof is already at the maximum height.
No, the chimney actually needs to be higher than the roof, right?
Yeah,
yeah, that's pretty typical. I work in a lot of different areas, and we've never had it different than that, although I'm not, if it
Laura can talk more about the calculations, but the calculations are not about this single flue.
Yeah, but on the one drawing that we had, the west elevation, the chimney flue is adjacent to the top of the roof, and then on the other ones, it's proud of the roof height. So I was just wondering whether that was just an error on that west elevation.
Well, the chimney flues are very narrow, and they do go above the height limit. So, I mean, not the overall height limit. The I don't know what you call that, the aggregate height limit.
Right.
Okay. But we will need to verify that. I just don't know off the top of my head. So that's a code question that we'll have to just put onto the list and revisit.
Yeah.
I have hi, this is Dylan. I have the code in front of me if you want me to.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yes, please
Do
go
that,
ahead.
Laura. Okay,
Yeah,
through the chair.
great.
So section 18.54.030, which is exceptions to height limits under the building bulk chapter, states that chimneys, flagpoles, and radio and television antennas may exceed the height limits established for the district, so zoning district, in which they are located, provided they do not exceed a height of 50 feet. So 50 feet would be the limit for a chimney, a flagpole, or a radio and television antenna, if those are still around.
I think we can adhere to that, right? I think it will be
Right. Thank you for looking that up. Any CB enthusiasts that
Vintage art.
Thank you.
right? All right. If there aren't any more questions, we'll move into a discussion format. We've sort of been discussing it already, but maybe we can ask, say, Megan to start with her thoughts on this project.
Sure. Well, you know, this house clearly was a difficult layout if you were going to just try to do a remodel. And so I can see how a new build is the right path here. And the footprint is basically the same. In fact, taking the pool, part of the home that was towards the pool back and creating more outdoor gathering area is just really smart to me. And those gorgeous trees will be just surrounding you and really fantastic. I actually love the variation in the materials. I love the single shading, you know, you have a couple of different materials on the side. That's not a board and batten, but it's similar to that. And the two different roof materials. I like it. I think it breaks up the structure, as you know, otherwise it could be this mass of a giant roof of standing seam and solid facade. So I like the variation a lot. And when I first saw this come through and it said modern farmhouse, I go, they know they can't do a white one, right? Yeah, you know, that was like worried that like this is just an initial visit. I hope they don't want a white house. But so I think the color board is spectacular. The big one for me is reducing your impervious surface, and I think you can do it. And I think you just need to figure out other materials to use, and really what will that carport garage become? Because if it is just going to be a workshop or even a little guest house, maybe it just needs a path, you know, a stair path that's not very, you know, impervious down from the main house. You know, does it really need a car to come up to it? So that I think you can do that. Protect that beautiful tree, or all of them, but that one really spectacular one. And the pool, if you do want to consider, I know that the lower area that looks like a fire pit, you call it a pool deck in the new plans. So if you do want to put in a pool, you need to count for that with the impervious surface, because it won't be possible unless it's coming in now and we're working with things.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And if you really want a pool, maybe you get rid of that accessory structure altogether. You know, that will change a lot.
Right, that's what, I mean, there might be a pool in our dreams. It's definitely not in the budget.
Right, well, sure, yeah.
We took it away, but it is a thought that in the future, putting the pool somewhere else with a small auxiliary unit, we would just tear down then the existing garage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
I think it's gorgeous. I get it. It's a stunning piece of property, and I'm excited to see it come back, and I'm looking forward to my commissioners on what they have to say. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Megan. Let's go to Kenny.
I agree with what's been said already, with what Megan had to say. I agree that the impervious surface issue, it sounds like we have a couple of potential contributors to solution in the driveway for the old garage, and potential reductions in the requirement due to the long driveway. So I'm hopeful that we'll find your solutions there. I think it probably should be said that after one fire season in Portola Valley, it's possible that you will be wondering why nobody suggested working with the most fire safe materials you could find for the exterior of the home. I agree with Megan that the design looks beautiful, and it's maybe something as it is with the heterogeneous materials, but it may be something to treat as an interesting design problem to look at what's considered today's most fire safe material, or else a year or two from now, you and your insurance company might wonder why nobody suggested it. It sounds like you understand the whole dark sky thing, so there isn't really anything to discuss there. Overall, it looks like a fun project, and I'd say good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
It's a beautiful site.
Al, what do you think?
I think that the design is just perfect for the lot, and I think it's a spectacular lot. I would agree completely with Kenny on the comment on fire safety. Right now, it is legal to put wood shingles on a house in Portola Valley, but it's probably not going to be legal for much longer. I would say, you probably only a year or two. And I really think it's worth some investigation on your part as to whether or not you can create the same feel with some other material, some sort of pseudo, fire resistant, something that looks like wood shingles but isn't. Is I think you will regret it a few years down the road if you don't. I think you will find that you have really tough time getting insurance, or it'll be very, very expensive. So, I think that that's something that you should definitely take a hard look at. I mean, what you have now looks spectacular, but I think that you might regret it in the long run if you just go with wood shingles. And then my other comment is, it's such a beautiful piece of land. I think that minimizing landscaping as much as possible and just keeping it in very close to the house is the way to go on this piece of property with the oak trees you've got and just the land around the oaks. It's so nice. Don't overdo it on the landscaping, because it's such a beautiful piece of property, and I really think that the design that you come up with is incredibly appropriate for that piece of land. And if possible, I'd say no fencing either. Just it's in a nice open area. Minimizing fencing, or just, if you want to have a vegetable garden or something, put the fence around that, but try not to fence this beautiful piece of land. I think that's it. I think this is really a super proposal as it is. Just I'm worried about the fire safety.
Thank you, Al. Jane, you're up.
Right. As the other commissioners, I like the design and I like the colour board, but also with the other commissioners, when I hear the word shingles, I hear the word fire hazard. So that's where, with the fact you've got the tall trees that will be adjacent to that shingle roof, if those go up, the embers will go onto the roof, etc. The impervious surfaces was a big thing for me, but I think you've got a solution hopefully there. The lights you're covering, so I will leave you to choose those. I always comment on maximum heights. I don't like buildings built to the maximum height. So that, but if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. And I can't comment on the landscaping plans because I haven't seen the plans as yet. They weren't with my packet, so I can't comment on any of the planting choices. But I do like the design, but I am worried about the fire safety. And it's something that we're having drummed into us and have had drummed into us over the past couple of years. So shingles, just red flag.
No, understood. I think the one point of clarification is the roof is comp shingle and then the standing seam, obviously, so that it's just the siding, which.
Right. No, it's the siding is still, that's a big issue for fire.
No, I understood. Understood. Yeah. And we did this again similarly in Marin, where we essentially put a prophylactic. And I'm sure you guys are keenly familiar with kind of the modern technologies to solve some of those problems. So
they also make other types of sidings that look as though they're shingles, but it's made of concrete. I mean, you have to. The engineering of that is so different. But there's stuff out there. But I'll be honest, I haven't had a loss of insurance here yet in Portola Valley. I do have a standing seam metal roof. but my home and my tiny little home at the beach in Carmel, I do have a fire rated shingle roof, and I couldn't get insurance, and I have to use this, you know, covered California, really ridiculous insurance. It's coming, you know, it's coming. We all need to be aware of that, you know.
Certainly.
Right. Jane, any other comments?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Well, I'd say we're unanimous on appreciating the design characteristics of this project. I really like the massing. I like the way that it fits on the site. Appreciate that you're trying not to do any serious cantilevers. That the structure sort of, you know, flows down the hill a little bit. And I think, you know, as I hear you describe your design goal of the existing farmhouse with an addition, I think the materials differences really get you there. It's a little bit like an old rectangular barn structure with a 2-story residential addition added to the end of it. So now, whether or not anybody, this is always an issue for me with elevation drawings, is does anybody actually ever see it that way? But I think no matter what the perspectives from the public point of view are, or the neighbors, it's going to be a very nice looking house. So I really applaud that. Issue of the cedar shingles, you're certainly aware of. The one thing that I would add to that is that the very dark, sort of blackish stained approach, I think can work as long as it has a little bit of a weathered look. We've got an example or two in town of homes with that effect on the siding, where the impression was it was going to be a little bit more variegated than it turned out to be. And something that's sort of monolithically black ends up having a very different look than something that looks older and weathered. So that would just be my caution about the exterior finish. If it's too homogeneous and too dark, I think it will sort of, I'll call it, it might spoil the effect of the weathered old farm building that it seems to me you're trying to achieve. It sounds like you have a good plan. If you remove that asphalt that you're talking about, I think that right there by itself gets you under the maximum impervious surface and explore the credit for the driveway. That may give you enough headroom to add a pool or an ADU or something like that down the road without having to tear too much down. I'm looking forward to seeing the completed landscape drawings, and along with my fellow commissioners, really appreciate a sort of minimal approach, preserving what's there, taking out invasives, avoiding too much ornamental stuff. If there are ornamentals, that they're in close to the house and more sort of in the private space. And of course, minimal lighting in the landscape. And I think you mentioned that before. We sometimes see finished applications that have extensive pathways with a path light every 10 feet. And we usually ask people to remove those. So something to think about there. And as far as fencing goes, I notice you, looks like you have a couple of fine canines watching the meeting.
There they are.
Behind you. Yes. Handsome dogs. You may want to have some fencing to contain them. It's a pretty wild area. You may not want them running up and down the canyon. And so, you know, if you decide to do that, it would be great if that area can be somewhat limited and not just a perimeter of the property. And of course, we have limitations on fencing about transparency, and a woven wire fencing on posts can be pretty invisible, but still very effective for containing pets. And one thing that we're really serious about is being careful not to cut off wildlife corridors. So if you do decide to look at some fencing issues, give some thought to where the wildlife moves, and try not to cut that off. That's about all I can think of to add to what you've already done. It's really an excellent start. I think you have not a whole lot of work to do design-wise to put this in a finished shape for us to review formally.
Great. So I think actually, Dylan, and maybe you would know, did we submit the landscape design? I thought we had a fairly oh, we didn't, Chris?
No, I didn't see one
Oh, okay.
when I looked at the plans.
Oh, I don't know why not.
I know there is one, but it wasn't the set I received.
Chris, you're on
Right.
mute.
So the intent, as I expressed to the project team, was the main focus generally is on the design, hence the term conceptual design review. And because the landscaping hasn't really been reviewed by conservation committee, that's generally the process that we have applications go through for the formal. So the emphasis on the plan set was for the design components. So that's the reason why it was segmented out, because the applications that we did receive were for the formal ASCC and site development application, which is the next step in the process.
We're so eager. We just
Is it
decided
possible?
shark, right? And go quickly, but we appreciate it.
The conservation committee does do a very good job on telling you or giving the indications of which native plants, which plants they don't like. So their advice is very good before you come to us with a design plan.
Yeah, they're a great resource.
Thankfully, Chris has worked in the area, so that's one of the reasons why we've engaged her services. You just a very modest, right, at the end of the day, right?
Correct.
So we appreciate it. Thank you. I mean, and I think the one comment, Chairman Ross, that I would appreciate is like the one thing about that stain siding. How many iterations did we do?
Yeah. It is not going to. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so you have the same concerns that I do.
Oh, she
Yes,
spent a lot of time.
We've actually done it before at the house in Marin, and it was really painful, and we got it
Perfect.
beautiful.
Perfect.
Very
Well,
variegated
and now you might have a new challenge of applying that research to a different, perhaps, surface material. So
Oh, we know him well, the gentleman who stained it all. So we did the pre-stain.
Good. I wonder if there will be a comeback of asphalt shingle siding. It was a great material for fireproofing, and they stamped it in ways that made it look like cedar shingles, and except for the health hazard, it was a great product.
Through the chair, before we
Yes, Laura.
finish, with the conceptual design review, we have good discussion, and I think that's been very good. But we do need to see if there's any members of the public that had any comments on this project.
Thank you very much for that reminder. And I will open the public hearing and invite anybody who's attending to comment on this project.
And I do not see any hands up so far. Any members of the public, raise your hand in Zoom.
We'll give people a little bit of time here because we sort of took them by surprise, a little bit out of order. Thanks again for that reminder.
Okay, I do not see any.
Okay, great. Well, that concludes our discussion. Our experience is that staff prepares very, very good minutes of these meetings. So if you want to have a record of the discussion, I think you'll be able to find it there when those are issued. But you may be on a fast enough track that your design is done before the minutes are ready. And that would probably be fine too.
Check your inbox.
You sound eager, and we're eager to see it. So we're looking forward to it. Any closing thoughts? Anybody else before we close the item?
I did have, like, I was
Yes.
told not to mention this, but I my curiosity I have to ask is the adjacent property that's essentially been abandoned for the better part of what looks like 30 years. Just curious, because there is no,
Do you guys know anything
there
about
is
it?
no documentation, no support, no understanding.
We can't find any name to communicate with. I don't know if you know the property we're talking about, but we're very certainly curious about it.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I
Yeah.
jog by there frequently, but I don't have any insight into that property other than it certainly looks abandoned.
Which number is it?
It's 617 Westridge.
It's not the one that belongs to Brown, is it?
I don't know who it belongs to. I just know it looks abandoned.
The neighbors all have, gossip about what happened, but it is abandoned, and it was clearly abandoned in a hurry, and it looks like it's been sitting for over 20 years in the exact state that it's currently in.
I mean, it's
Right.
just downright creepy,
It's
right?
bizarre.
It really is. I mean, of course, curiosity, I had to go poke my nose over, see what was inside. And it literally looked like someone stood up from eating dinner with their
Yeah,
plates
plates
on
are
the
on the
table,
table.
got up and left.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I've never gotten that close to it, but it certainly, I mean, the driveway looks like it hasn't been used in 20 years. And yeah, no, it's weird.
Have they got lots of invasive weeds? We might be able to.
Looks like the fire department went in recently. There was a lot of.
I'll buy it. I'll buy it.
I know.
First, you got to find the owner, Megan.
I will. I'm doing my homework tonight.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are some local real estate agents who may have some insight.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Sorry for the sidebar. That was.
Oh, no problem.
That's great.
Great. Thanks very much for bringing this to us, and looking forward to seeing the completed application.
All right. Thanks, you
Likewise.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. We'll close that item and come back to our agenda. Looks like we have commission reports up next.
Oh.
Megan, did you?
Olive has something to say.
Yes.
So I just joined the ad hoc wildfire fire.
Thank you.
Yes, and we had our meeting on Thursday last week, which Al, you didn't tell me was going to be over 2 hours. Just saying.
I said that it's a time-consuming position. I didn't get into details about. I didn't know how long the meeting was going to be.
Well, I'll tell you, they've been doing a lot of work, and it's really amazing and super important for all of us. So
Oh,
I think that might be a daughter home from tennis.
Uh-huh.
So we had a lot to go over. We talked about evacuation routes and some kind of modeling companies that can, help us with that process. Is it worth for us to spend money on that, or is it ridiculous because they're going to say you need to add 4 lanes on Alpine and Petrola Road, which we can't. So that was a big discussion. Clearly, we had the fire marshal on, and the defensible space issue is top of mind, and how far that goes, almost to 400 feet, depending on the grade. So this is a lot to talk about. A lot of community members and members of this ad hoc were discussing, private lands where people might not be able to afford to clear their homes, because it could be hundreds, seriously over $100,000 to $200,000 to clear your properties. So we had that. The Mid-Penn was also on and talked about their clearing of Windy Hill and around the Sequoias, and some other interesting, little plots of land that we didn't know that the town owned, and that Mid-Penn also had jurisdiction over. There was some fun talk about goat mitigation, which is, everyone was like, oh, what? Okay, great. anyways, it was a great conversation and it did run long, but really important that we're doing this. And it sounds as though Woodside's not doing any of this. I don't know about Los Altos or our neighborings, or even the Palo Alto portion in the hills here. We're kind of taking the lead here in our area. Marin actually has a big one that we should study and talk to them about their wildfire preparedness. But I'm glad I'm on this committee, and this will be really important for all of us. Oh, of course, there was also talk about insurance, and we're all getting dropped, as I mentioned earlier. You know, I got dropped in my Carmel beach house, but because the fires in Carmel Valley were so significant, the insurance I had were just totally dropped. So I had to go to this California Fair Plan down there for my tiny little house there, but it's double the insurance.
Yeah.
Before.
At least you could get something, but that's
right.
tough.
And I personally here have Chubb, and they haven't showed me any signs that they're not going to continue again. But a lot of people in town, I think it was Nationwide, AAA, some of them are just dropping this zip code altogether. So I'm glad that Jane brought this up and sent it to you, Al, but we need to be worried. So that was my report. I didn't go to see any properties. I wish I did, but I did walk by and saw story poles at Degas, on Degas, off Westridge.
Right.
Maybe 107?
Well, sure. There's probably only like 5 houses there.
So we do have an active application in for that, but it came in fairly recently. So their story polls might be a little bit premature, but we'll see. It just came in.
I can see story
yeah.
polls. I can see story polls from my house looking at Westridge at the moment. So I don't know whether I think it could be Degas, because I was trying to see whether I could see 627 Westridge, whether that was the one I could see, but it wasn't. So
right, that must be it. It is a little bit lower than Westridge, you know, going down towards Shady Trails down there, but you can see it from the road very well.
Yeah,
as you can see the existing structure. So, but
okay.
All right. Anybody else have a report? Any activity in the last 2 weeks?
I don't.
No. Jane?
Well, I have a non-property report because I became a certified California naturalist 2 weeks ago.
Oh, well, congratulations.
So, I can now tell my invasives.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm learning. But
And
that I haven't seen any properties, so
all right.
That was just an FYI.
Great. Add more expert to our panel.
I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Even though you're not a California native, you know California native.
That's right. That's right. We won't call you an invasive. No, we welcome you with open arms.
No, I'm defined as an alien with English as a second language is how I'm actually defined.
Okay. Well, it's a great coincidence that people from England also speak English.
It is, it helps.
It helps, yes. Al, anything to report?
No, I don't have anything.
All right. Kenny? Any ASCC work in the last couple of weeks?
No, not for me. I should point out that I think that when we have a landscape architect on the call, excluding landscape architecture from the definition of design might hurt some feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a question of what do we really want to focus on conceptual design.
Sure.
And I think, to me, it's okay to look at kind of a conceptual landscape design too, when we look at
Yeah,
the
that's
conceptual
part
design.
of ASCC. That's a big
Right.
part of our.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something I guess we could talk with Laura and Dylan and just what they think. But yeah, seeing a conceptual landscape design today would have been fine.
I would have loved to have
Yeah.
seen conceptual.
Well, some
I
of
agree.
these, since we're kind of working up this procedure,
Yep.
you know, these are kind of the test cases.
Yeah.
And
Right.
part of the conceptual design, the goal of it was to have people not spend too much money on the plans if there were going to be big changes.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, you know, we did do the one where the question was, would it be okay to remove a whole bunch of these trees? And your feedback to them was, in that case, it is okay. So there are going to be some cases where the landscape plan is going to be really important for conceptual design
Right.
review, but we also don't want to push people to prepare the plans if what they want feedback on is something else.
Right.
If that makes sense. If they want
Yep.
feedback on the
That-
siting and, you know, then push them to prepare the landscaping. These are the things we just need to talk through as we develop this a little bit more.
Right.
Sure.
That makes sense.
That does make sense. I would say that if somebody has something, that it might as well throw it in the packet. So
Yeah, they
Sounds
seem
good.
caught off
we
guard
wouldn't
by the fact
require
that we
someone to
didn't
have a
see it.
landscape
Yeah,
plan,
don't
even a
require it.
conceptual one. If they happen available, then it would be interesting to see how they're doing and a little easier to give them feedback about completing it. So this idea, as you say, Laura, the conceptual review is sort of evolving, but I would say it's one of those sort of bring what you got kind of situations where
Even if it's little scratchings on a paper, we can see it. It doesn't have to be a whole, you know, it could just be conceptual. That's
Yeah.
what the-
yeah. So if somebody has something, feel free to include it in our packet.
Great.
Let's see. I have one report to make, which is that the Priory discovered that an approved material, a corrugated metal roofing that's designed to rust, similar to, for example, Corten steel is one of the brands. The exact manufacturer that they had selected wasn't available anymore. They had a substitute material that looked essentially identical, and appears to me that it's going to be indistinguishable from what we reviewed in a high quality material. So that's the only activity
Yeah.
I've had, I think.
It'll age and rust and create a seal and not be shiny and reflective.
Right. Yeah. Same concept. It's a weathering material.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's it for me. So I guess we're done with commission reports. Let's move on to the staff report.
I don't have any
Oh,
specific report.
Before we move on, I should probably invite public comment on our commission
Oh,
reports.
yeah, we're doing it now.
We're
I
doing,
think that
inviting comment on
that's
every agenda
probably an
item.
optional one. If you want to see if there are public comments, you can.
Well, since I've said it, let's go ahead and see if anybody raises their hand.
Judy.
Judy, very good. Judy, you're on.
Thank you. I would make just a brief comment about the idea of including the landscaping in this very conceptual before you really get down to the nitty gritty. And that is that we on conservation take a really deep dive into the vegetation, et cetera. And that if you in your conceptual review sort of do a little pass over and say, oh yeah, that looks fine. If you want to take out those 23 trees, that we don't see a problem with that. And then when we go and we look at, the neighborhood and the adjacent properties and it's a whole lot of other things. And then we come up with an idea that's very different than yours. It gets a little awkward if in your preliminary sort of once over, you've said, okay, when then we have a strong recommendation otherwise. So I can see that you'd want to see it, but I would hope that you might keep your comments so they don't lock us in or lock you in. Otherwise, our advice to you becomes a little irrelevant in the worst cases and confusing in the best. So I feel really strong that we need to be working, together and in sync.
Well,
Yeah, I
here's,
think that's a good point, Judy.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
here's a question for Laura then. If we do have a preliminary, pre-preliminary landscape plan, does conservation not see it?
We haven't decided yet for this process, how we would like to handle it. So these are the details that we need to work out.
It seems appropriate because the landscape plan can be such a critical part of the conceptual design of the structure.
Yeah.
In particular around here.
I would love to have conservation speak to this, not just Judy, being on this call right now, but also have seen a plan, if there is one, and have input from them documented, and it's important.
Mm-hmm. Or even if not
Short of making it a
documented. Yeah, the deep dive that conservation does is very valuable to us, I believe, in our review and approval process. In the conceptual design, it seems a shame to put conservation through that hoop on a design that may be very incomplete.
Okay.
So maybe the idea would be that it could be routed to someone in conservation, and that person could participate in our meeting and add some comments from conservation's point of view.
I guess I feel a little uncomfortable with that because I think a once over lightly for us is different than it is for you. I think for you, it makes perfectly good sense because they're going to be back to you at least once and probably twice. And you're talking about some fairly specific things, but if you ask us to look at it, we'd want to do what we regularly do because our different members have different strengths. Some people are really horticulturists and some people are really naturalists. And we try hard when we form these subcommittees to get someone who has each of those things so that the report that we give to you is broader and deeper and therefore more valuable than it otherwise would be. So I think one of us could never be as good as three of us are. So yeah. Okay.
Well, this
that
process is
makes sense.
evolving, and it sounds like maybe conservation isn't, let's just say, equipped to do this sort of more free form, offering guidance rather than doing an actual careful review of something.
Well, and we do guidance stuff, people call, send us an email and say, what about this? And we, do a little mini consult with them sometimes, but that's sort of different than this. I think we take this job pretty seriously and want to make sure we're giving you our best in-depth shot at it when we do it. I think the main thing is the worrying about conflicts. And as you'll see, there's something coming up that where I think they came to you conceptually and people said, oh yeah, that's fine if you take out all those redwoods. And when the subcommittee went out, they had a stroke.
Okay.
Well, I worry that
get
the
to hear that
Conservation
input.
Committee is constraining itself by not participating in a conceptual design review where landscape planning is made available. Because then we're obligated to provide comment and in a way need to be consistent between the conceptual design review and on. And if something that the Conservation Committee finds later on has a large impact on the potential design, they've lost that opportunity because we've done the conceptual design review on our end.
So if I may, through the chair, just kind
Yes,
of
please, Dylan.
color the picture in a little bit on kind of the initial expectations or our interactions with the applicant. So for example, for this project, when I reach out to them, this project is actually only at a pre-application stage, so we don't have a formal application on file yet. And so our understanding was the conceptual design review was a way for the ASCC to become involved in the early stages of the conceptual design. And so with pre-applications, staff generally does not anticipate or expect an applicant to have anything outside of a site plan, floor plan, elevations, and sections, mainly because they're still gathering documents to formally submit. So this process, and I will agree, it's ever evolving, is mainly geared towards having the non-starter items, or kind of the items that would be challenging to move forward to approval for on the design, the structure itself. So with the landscaping component, when I interact with people, for example, with 85 and 77 Palmer, which I believe Judy was mentioning, they had the landscaping plans already in place. It was more, that wasn't something we expected or requested from them. So the challenge may be is if someone wants to get in front of ASCC and have the landscaping component, which is a large endeavor and is costly, just like we don't require civil plans at this stage, that would be something we would have to consider with respect to what items do we front end through this process. So I just wanted to kind of point out kind of where, when I interact with people and I push them forward to conceptual design, kind of the items that I anticipate and advise them to gather. So I hope that helps the discussion, at least.
Yeah, thank you for that. One thing that we haven't mentioned, but is often a feature of landscape plans, is not just, say, a plant list and distribution of plants, but physical structures, retaining walls, paths, all kinds of things that we may want to offer guidance on, or an applicant may want some guidance on, apart from, say, a plant list or a tree plan. So if somebody has something like that that they want us to take a look at during conceptual review, it seems to me to be appropriate to offer that. At the same time, I agree with Judy that we ought to be careful as commissioners not to greenlight things for people that may actually be more controversial than we think they are. And you know, we do give people a caveat. I know staff does. Conceptual reviews, there's no approval taking place. It's just guidance, and it may not be the final word on something. We may, you know, reverse course when we get somebody else's input, such as the Conservation Committee. But I think as commissioners, we can keep that in mind, and staff can help us keep that in mind if we're reviewing conceptually a landscape plan, to be careful about what we tell people about plants and trees, but focus more on the physical attributes of the landscape plan, if there is one.
Well, something we might miss, though, is the landscape lighting.
Yes.
And I mean, maybe we could just say at the end of every meeting, if it doesn't include a landscape plan, this is what we're looking for, just as we kind of did tonight, you know, native landscape kept open, ornamentals towards the home, but also say minimal lighting paths, illumination, that kind of stuff. But the landscape lighting seems to be one of the big issues that we do have when it does come to us.
Right. So if there had been a landscape plan in front of us on a conceptual basis, and there were a lot of paths with a lot of lighting, we would have been more specific about guidance rather than my just sort of general comment about not doing path lighting and lots of paths.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I think we can do that without stepping on conservation's toes. So that's sort of, you know, obviously this is, you know, in process of figuring out how to do this.
Right. And I'm not really thinking, I don't think of us as being in competition at all here. I think of us as being your handmaiden, hand servants, you know, doing this deep dive into a piece of it that so that you don't have to do it, so that you can make the higher level decisions based on the, you know, the more complex analysis that we've done. We absolutely get that the decisions are yours in the long range. We just want to make sure we give you all the info and the conflicting things that we see, so that as you make those decisions, you can think about it. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate.
Okay,
Yeah,
Judith.
thanks, Judy. Those are good comments.
Yeah. Anybody else from the public that would like to comment now on the commission reports
Betsy.
item? Betsy is on.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ross. I first wanted to compliment, well, all of you. It's an interest. I hadn't planned on staying, but decided to. It was interesting, and wanted to compliment Kenny in particular for opening up the avenue to incorporate the landscape architecture, since we're California, after all, the indoor outdoor living, it's so integral anyway. And I'm highly in support of Judy's comments, including the power of the committees working together and in sync. I wanted to call out then the opportunity to get languaging more precise, because as Megan was, when I was at this fire committee meeting, the ad hoc fire committee meeting on Thursday, Megan accurately quoted the word clearing that was used a few times, but it was blended in with other language. So it was quite hard to understand whether it was a selective diseased and damaged trees. Where I'm taking this is, and congratulations to Jane on becoming a certified naturalist, but this idea about invasives and what happens when we do a lot of clearing is you immediately open it up to invasion. And that then becomes its own fire hazard. It's another dramatic problem that we're creating unwittingly. So there's just power. I see tremendous power and all upside to bringing committees together right now, especially as we're facing so many issues of increasing import. So thank you for the opportunity to underline. That was one of my major points to begin with today. I just hated to chew up your time on the front end of the meeting.
Thank you, Betsy. Laura, is there anybody else with their hand up?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll close commission reports, move on to staff report. And Laura, do you have anything to tell us?
I do not have a staff report, any specifics for you this afternoon.
Okay, great. Let me just ask what the midterm horizon looks like for agendas. Are we looking at increasing numbers of things coming in the pipeline, or is it going to continue at about this pace?
I would expect it'll continue about this pace. What we're trying to do is spread out all of our applications and submittals so that we're taking kind of a slow and steady approach. So we're trying to spread things out and just keep things coming to you kind of in a measured way. So I would anticipate we'll continue to do that for at least the next few months.
Great.
All right. I remember a time early in my career here where we would have as many as 5 or 6 full approval items on the agenda. Some of those meetings got pretty long. So it's interesting to have just, 1 or maybe 2 items on the agenda. I'm not complaining. All right.
And since we're meeting over Zoom and it's worked well for this commission, sometimes we would, in the old days, we would have held one of those items or maybe tried to group them together or maybe canceled a meeting and then held them together. But since this has worked well for us, we figure there's no downside to having a meeting and keep those projects moving.
Yep, I agree. Okay, we'll close. Well, I'll invite public comment first before we close that item.
And there's none.
Okay, good. We'll close the staff report item. Move on. Has everyone had a chance to review them, and are there any comments?
Got no comments.
They look good to me.
They look fine to me.
Right. Megan, any corrections?
All good for me.
All right. Look good to me too. I'll entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
I
Good. Any opposed? No. That passes 5-0. And Laura, should I invite public comment on this?
Well, technically, yes, you should have.
Technically, yes, I
When we
should.
had it, yeah, when we had a motion and a sec, we probably should have taken public comment. So we're still
Okay.
getting used to this at ASCC, so we will get the hang of it.
Right. Yeah, the Zoom format is just a whole new world in various ways. But it's great to get more public participation at our meetings.
Yeah.
With that thought, we'll adjourn this meeting, and we'll all see each other in 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
3 weeks, actually, I think.
The second Monday of April.
Yeah.
What's
think
the
this could
date
be
of
fun.
that? Does anyone know offhand?
Let's see. What is that date?
19th.
I think it's the 12th, isn't it?
Yeah, it
April
would be the
12th?
12th.
Yeah, the
Yes.
12th,
Oh, it's
Yes.
3
the 12th and the 26th.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, you guys will see me in a new setting.
Oh,
I get to go see my mom.
wow.
Oh, great.
Her in a year and well, it's last December. So a year, almost, it feels like 2 years.
Wow.
And I'm taking the girls out. We leave on Thursday and we're gonna go stay with her for a month. And
Wow.
the girls will do Zoom school and then have spring break in between. And lucky me, my mom lives on the big island of Hawaii.
Okay.
Oh.
So
So
different
Oh,
time
that's quite a
zone.
sacrifice
Even
you're
though
making.
it'll be earlier for me. It'll be great. You know,
Yeah.
I might not have showered. I might just have beach hair.
Uh-huh.
I cannot tell you how excited I am. We got our COVID test this morning so we can, arrive in Hawaii, not quarantine. My mom's fully vaccinated. She was in January. Hawaii
Wow.
was January. And I'm it's just going to be amazing.
Well, that's great. We look forward to a different backdrop.